All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Monday, August 29th, and here we are starting out the first week of game music composition. I am Chris Latham. I am the course director for the class, and I'll be hanging out with you this month as we talk all about the process of creating music for a video game and the role of a music composer when working on a game project. So we have lots of different topics to discuss that will unfold throughout the month. And our session this afternoon is going to be similar, but well, it's going to be a little bit unique compared to the rest of our Monday classes, where we have a lot of introductory material to discuss and to get out of the way before we really dive into your first week one assignments. We'll be talking about that towards the second half of our class time this afternoon. We will certainly get into all of the assignments that we have in store for the month. But I know that hopefully you had the opportunity to download the materials for the class starting out here for the first week. But I know the class starts today, and so please get access to all of the materials as soon as possible. And so we will discuss all of the assignments and different ways that you will be creating music for your own custom video games. So we'll talk about the process that's involved, some of the tools, the overall approach. The month is kind of divided up into, at least in the very general way, into two halves, where the beginning of the month is a bit more focused on the creative approach of how music is built for a game. And then towards the end of the month, we get into how your WAV files actually make it into the game and are working right along with the game, so that when somebody presses a button on a controller or hits a key on their keyboard or mouse, that the correct piece of music plays or the correct sound effect. All sorts of different parts of the overall audio soundtrack to discuss. We'll talk about how a music composer works in the skill set that the music composer brings, how that works into the much larger scheme of how the game is actually being created, how your music fits right in with the rest of the game development, so that it creates everything that you hear and matches up with everything that you see going on inside the game. Let's start out with our class sessions here on our Monday and Wednesday afternoons. By this Monday is a little bit different than the rest of them, but by next Monday you will have turned in your first round of assignments, and so we will take each Monday afternoon to do a bit of peer review, so that we can take a listen to everybody's work that they've been working on throughout that week. And we also talk about the new assignments that are coming up in store for that week. So next Monday in week 2, we will go over and do a little bit of feedback and review for submissions from week 1 before we get into the new assignments for week 2. And so that will progress through the rest of our Monday afternoon classes. And then on Wednesday, we have a series of different topics to discuss involved in how your music works together with the game, how it functions right along with the graphics and the interactivity in the game. A couple of things that we hit on. One of the points that we focus on is that music for a game doesn't exist in its final format until somebody actually plays the game. And everybody who plays a game should have a bit of a different experience with the sound and the music that they hear. Maybe it's a little bit different, maybe it's vastly different. The more modern games have pretty wide open gameplay experiences that cover over many, many hours of gameplay. And each person who goes navigates through that story might approach it a bit differently. And so the music has to react against the gameplay or whatever the player does with the controller in their hand. So the music for a video game does not exist in one linear file like it does for a movie or for a music album. A music album has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has track 1, it has track 15 or 20 or however many tracks are on your CD. And while it may be divided up into individual tracks, it's basically one long experience, 1 hour and a half long music album. When you put in a disc to a DVD or a Blu-ray disc to watch a movie, you can select either the stereo mix or the 5.1 surround mix, and it just plays back the 2-hour long audio surround sound audio file from the beginning to the middle to the end. And every single time you rewind that song or you rewind back that movie, you are going to have the exact same experience. However, in a video game, each person that plays the game should have a bit of a different experience in how the music and the sounds are heard. Games can last for a very long time. There are some games that you have on your phone. You bring out the phone for 5 minutes while you're waiting in line. You play for a few rounds of something. You put it away and you're done. Other games have hours and hours worth of gameplay involved in them, whether it's 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 hours worth of gameplay. If you get into multiplayer online games, people get lost in games for years on end. That doesn't mean that there is a 100-hour long audio file that is playing from beginning to end in the exact same order for everybody that plays the game. So, music for a video game, different than a movie or an album, doesn't exist in one long linear file. We're going to talk about the difference between linear music and nonlinear music as a core function of a music soundtrack for a game. Most music that you've ever listened to or composed or ever worked on is in a linear format. That is the way music exists. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a structure to it. It has intros and verses and choruses and solos and bridges and endings, outros. There is a lot of structure that we put into our music. And then once you get into a game, the game has to react to exactly what the player is doing. You don't know if somebody's going to go through as fast and as quick as possible. They're just going to blaze through the game, and they're doing really well all the way through it, and they get through it in record time, and they might even skip over different parts of your content in the audio soundtrack. And then there's other players that are going to run and hide in a corner for a while and slowly progress through the game, or they might run around in circles or run into a wall for an hour or just get lost in the game, or you have all sorts of different variety of gameplay and skill levels, and the music all needs to react to that. So we're going to talk about how music exists for a video game, how it plays back, and that level of interactivity that you have in a game. So music for a game is a non-linear piece of music or non-linear soundtrack. It exists in lots of little pieces and parts, notes or bars or musical phrases that exist in individual wave files that can be rearranged into different orders to react to the action that is going on screen. When you make music for a music album, It is music for just the sake of music. Somebody puts in that CD or they stream that song and they hear the music as the artist intended. And then you add in film or television, and now your music and your soundtrack reacts to the image on the screen. They play against each other and they have to work together. So then you add with games, not only do you have music, you have, or sound effects, audio in general, you have the image on screen, all of the graphics in the game, the video, and then you also have the interactivity. You have the fact that a human actually has a controller in their hand and they're going to do basically whatever they want through the whole game. And so your music has to react. You are not ultimately in control of how the music and the game is going to be played back. So you have to account for all of the different possibilities. There is this interactivity where once the player has a controller in their hand, all bets are off, and you don't know exactly how long anything is going to take. You know what is possible in the game because it's really just, I mean, it is a game. There's a finite series of choices that can happen or gameplay that can happen. So you always know what is possible, and you know where everything is, and or where things are located, or always where that character is. The main thing that you don't know is when anything is going to happen. So we're going to talk about how the music reacts, how the music interacts with the game, and how do you create a soundtrack where you don't ultimately know all of the possibilities that might come to be. So lots of different interesting topics to discuss when working on audio for games and music and soundtracks. So there's a bit to discuss on how music for games is different in the final approach and how it is actually consumed, since the player has some control over what's going on. But the creation of music for video games is very similar to creation of music for lots of other media or platforms. It is still composition, it is still recording, it is still performance and understanding all of the gear and understanding the tools to get the job done. Most composers or most musicians, they start out in some other media. They are music composers for film or television. They are a music artist, and they want to switch over to games. They know how to make music, and they know how to create all of the audio. But once they have all of the WAV files, they don't really know what to do with them to actually get them working in the game. So we'll also talk about the process and the tools that are used to actually have the music interact and react to what is going on in the video game. And really that sort of overall process. So those are some of our general directions that we will tackle this month. Really, the class is set up to expose you to another part of the entertainment industry and to really give you a sense of whether kind of give you access to work on these types of projects, hopefully pique your interest in these types of games and then or these types of projects. And so if an opportunity presents itself to work on an interactive game or an app or a video game, console game, mobile game, whatever it is, you have a sense of what is involved, the size and scale, and the skills that are necessary to get the job done. Some people, or a lot of folks, come into the class without previous inclination or consideration of working in this part of the industry, learn what it's all about, and learn that there's a lot of opportunity in this part of the industry. And we kind of discuss how to move forward and how to enter this part of the industry, and show you that your music is just as viable in a video game as it is in on a music album, in a music library of some sort, or in a film or television show. It just is other avenues for your music to make money. So we'll show you the process, show you the steps involved. There are certainly those that go through the class that see what's all involved and don't want to go in that direction, because there is a technical aspect to it. There is a lot of issues. You're working on a broken game for months on end while working on a professional project. And it's kind of like a lot of different classes that you go through expose you to this part to different parts of the industry, but also show you what the behind the scenes is, and can sometimes ruin the magic of what's happening and going on, what's involved in the entire process. So it really just shows you what is involved in a game project, what skill set is necessary, the role of a game composer working with a game team, and give you projects to allow you to test out your skills in the creation of music and sound effects for games. I have a couple of disclaimers that I want to get out there pretty early on in the class to let people know just some heads up about different aspects of the class. Number one, and probably the most important, is you don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. Your ability to play a video game, to get the fastest time or the highest score or anything like that, be able to play the game with any sort of success, is not of import. We provide you with games. I understand that folks coming through this class have a wide variety of experience with video games. There are those that play video games, eat, live, and breathe the game industry, are really up on all the newest and latest games, are playing video games, are really interested in the process and the technology in the industry as a whole. And for those folks, I can nerd out with you all day long on games and topics and audio and music and all sorts of aspects of games and the industry. But I also know that there are folks coming through this class that haven't been playing a video game, or haven't played a video game since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man or playing Minesweeper on their computer or chess or anything like that. And that is perfectly fine also. People have a wide variety of experiences coming into this class. But while you are in this class, we will immerse you in the industry and in games and in the technology that's involved in it. If you don't play video games, we have games for you to play throughout the month. Each week you will be playing and working on a new video game that has a new need or musical approach for its soundtrack. So if you aren't involved in games or playing them, certainly you will have the opportunity throughout this month to be exposed to all aspects of the industry. So that's number one. You don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. However, the skills that are required for this class are the ones that you've been gathering through this entire degree program. The skills that are necessary are understanding composition and understanding instrumentation and orchestration and the production of your music, to be able to recognize a client's intentions and turn that into music. We have a couple of different projects where you are basically hired on as the music composer. I am the game client, or I'm the game developer. I hire you to create music for my video game. I provide you with documentation in the game itself and all of the material of what sounds need to be created, and then it's on you to generate all of the music to realize the musical soundtrack for that game. So skills of production and being able to properly format and bounce everything and pay attention to all of the details involved in the production of music for games. Because you are a bit, your music is at the whim of the game. The game has a very specific format for all of your files, and if they are not formatted and bounced correctly, they're just not going to work and function in the game. So you give up a bit of control for interactivity in the game, because like I said, that once the player has that controller in their hand, they control, whether they know it or not, they control the direction of the music by their actions in the game. So number one disclaimer is you don't actually have to be any good at video games to be successful in this class. Number two disclaimer, a common question that I hear pretty early on in the class is, do I have to know programming or coding to be successful as a music composer in the games industry? And that is a no. Because the skills, again, that are required of you as a music composer is the creation of the music, the realization of the music soundtrack. A lot of, let's say that again, often the responsibilities of the music composer end with the delivery of the final approved music, meaning that you fulfill your contract or your end of the deal with the delivery of the finished WAV files. And so then the game developer takes those WAV files and does something to them to put them into the game so that the game plays them back correctly. But you are not necessarily going to be the one who is implementing the music, programming or coding or putting it in to the game. Of course, any set of skills that you have is going to be valuable, and being technically minded and being able to communicate with a game developer is certainly a plus overall. And if you do understand any sort of coding or programming, of course that's going to be make you even more valuable. But is it a necessity to be successful as a music composer in games? No, it is not. Because you are working together as a kind of a team effort to working with the game developer to get the job done. You are often hired for your skills in making music as the audio guru for the game, and they expect you to take care of all of the music, and they'll control and take care of all of the aspects of the game development. So not your skills of creation of music are of much more importance than your skills, your technical skills of programming or coding. Now, there is a technical aspect to working in games. There's a heavy technical aspect, and you'll get a bit of exposure to that also. But it does not go to the level of programming and coding. So those are two disclaimers that I wanted to get out pretty early. We talked about our Monday and Wednesday classes. We're going to get into the actual assignments here in a bit. Yeah, that sounds like some of the overview intro stuff. Again, my name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director of the class. I've been with Full Sail for about 14 years now. Started over on campus, certainly before there was an online program, and started in the studios. My history before Full Sail is more in the production of commercial work, film, television work, recording, audio production, music, all that sort of stuff, studios. So when I came to Full Sail, I started out in the recording studios teaching that side of things. Also worked in the post-production classes. And then about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, something like that, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, Full Sail got on the game audio train. And we created a game audio class. And so we created first a campus class, and then we moved over. Eventually, this game music class came online about, 3 years ago. We just started a campus version of this about a year ago. So whatever interests you about the industry, certainly about music, all sorts of different topics, whatever you want to talk about, whether it's recording or composition or sound design or hardware or software or anything like that. Any examples? I have a website, engineaudio.com. You can find some stuff that I'm working on. Getting in contact with me, the best way would be iChat or email. To chat online, we can set up a time to talk. I am on campus on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I'm often away from my desk phone because on opposite days I'm online teaching. So if you call me up and leave a voicemail, then also email me or find me on iChat and we can set up a time to talk or go to training or anything like that. Engine Audio is my audio game audio contracting company outside of Full Sail. I've worked on a number of different game projects. So about 2007, 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there, I started getting into working on games. Certainly had a love of video games for many, many years, and also a love and experience of audio and music composition. And I saw a lot of opportunity in games, way more than I ever did in studio work or post-production work. Like a lot of folks, I started out wanting to be a rock star when I was getting out of school, and then I realized that probably wanted to work more on the engineering side of things. So I worked in studio and production houses, working with artists. And then I realized that artists don't always have money, or they don't have a lot of money. So I started working more with companies, doing production work, commercial work, and then I took my interest of audio and gaming and started applying it over to game projects. About that time, games really started to open up in the ability to tear them apart and add audio and music and sound. So I got involved in some game projects and started some free game projects initially on some modifying some games that I was already a fan of, and put together some portfolio and demo reels, and eventually sent that off to EA Sports. We have Tiburon here in Orlando, and they do a lot of EA Sports' games. They do Madden and PGA Tour and NCAA when it was around, and FIFA and Need for Speed and all sorts of different stuff. So we've been involved with them for a little while. Madden, we just did a lot of dialogue editing for Madden 17, which just came out. And also work on a multiplayer Sharks versus Diver online PC game. It's available through the Steam store, if you guys are familiar with what Steam is. So lots of different types of projects. Most of the stuff do a lot of implementation of audio and sound effects and music and all sorts of different types of things. So that's really where the work has been. Like I've said, I've found way more opportunity in games than I ever did in the music industry, certainly, and then in more of production after that. Then, so we'll talk about all that sort of stuff, how to find projects, how to find clients. Hopefully, again, one of the big purposes of the class is to show you, say, hey, look at all this cool stuff that's happening in games, and look at all the different types of games out there, and this is what it's involved in creating music. Heck, you're already making music. Might as well make it viable for a video game also. And then hopefully after piquing some interest, later in the month we talk about how to get started in the industry and how to find clients and projects and get involved in games. So those are certainly some goals, but overall goals in this class. Number one is to write music, of course. That's kind of why we are here through the whole degree program. You should be generating as much music and content as possible. In the later classes, they are more focused on projects and compositions, and whether for film or for songwriting or for games or whatever the medium is. And so you should be gathering as much of that content and material and holding on to it and building portfolios and demo reels, because that takes a whole bunch of time and effort that you should probably not wait until you step foot out of the degree program to start working on all of that stuff. Along with writing and creating music, playing video games. I have a very important concept in this class, which is called game research. And game research means you should be playing video games. If I said before, if you don't have any video games to play, then we provide you video games. But you should be paying attention to games, paying attention to the industry, what games are out there, how did they do all of their music and sound, who are the composers, who are the developers and publishers of the games, where did they create it, how did they create all of the music, was it entirely in a DAW, or was it with live recorded musicians, or is it a full orchestral recording session? Yes, it should be, it's fun and entertaining to play games, but you should also be critically listening to the game. How does the music switch, and how does it react to the gameplay? Does the player have any sort of control over the music that they hear? You should, if you don't have any games, you can go onto the Mac App Store. There are games, free games available. There you can go on to the download Steam, which is kind of like the iTunes for video games, and they have free Mac applications. If you have a gaming console, maybe you have a PlayStation or an Xbox or something like that. We'll be talking about find all your favorite games and pay attention to who did it and the companies behind the development. And this is extremely important for any part of the industry that you go into, right? It's all fun and games because it's video games, but if you are interested in going into the music industry, like you want to be an artist, you want to be a producer, a studio manager, own a studio, record label, be involved in the music industry, then you should be paying attention to that industry. Paying attention to charts, what's popular, what's good, is popular, does that mean good? Why is this making tons of money, or why is this not making money? Who are the record labels? Who are the production companies? Who are the artists? Where are the studios? Paying attention to the industry as a whole, so that when you talk with clients speak in terms of previous projects. So when you're in the studio or when you're composing or writing music, they reference other artists in history or modern artists, or they reference the aspects of songwriting or the production or the recording or mixing. Like, hey, did you hear the sound of that vocal or that drum sound or that synth or whatever it is? You have to have a library of knowledge to reference so that when a client speaks, you can kind of interpret what they mean. If you are interested in being a film composer or working in television, then, or in a music library of some sort, a broadcast or something, then you need to have a language of film or broadcast or TV or sports or whatever it is that you're trying to get your music into. Directors speak in terms of previous films or previous compositions, or in terms of particular sounds or musical approaches, theme and aesthetic, and fulfilling the kind of musical requirement to support the film. It just so happens that if you are interested in the video games industry, you need to be playing a whole bunch of video games, which is kind of sometimes the hardest thing to do. for good or for bad, right? I have a long backlog of games that I need to keep up with to see what is popular in the industry, what is sort of expected by audiences. When a client comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm looking for this particular genre," or "Did you play this game and hear that music soundtrack or that particular track or sound or sound effect, whatever it is," I have generally an idea of what they're talking about, or a mindset of how you might approach and get that sort of sound. So research in your industry is extremely important. The most fun game that I ever enjoy playing is making games, is working on games. I find way more enjoyable than actually playing games. But you set aside a certain amount of time to keep up and play games, and it takes a lot of time. And it's not like putting in a 2-hour movie on a Friday night and watching and covering a whole genre after a couple of movies. But a lot of games take a lot more time investment into them. So beyond all of that music writing and video game playing, of course, there's a lot of knowledge involved in that. You'll be learning a whole lot in how music is actually working with the game, how it is built and created. There's particular approaches that work well for a soundtrack. Each game, each week, has a unique approach and need for the music. Ultimately, you will be delivering a series of WAV files that make up the music soundtrack for the game, but each game needs different files that are functioning in a different way for each project. So, like I said, if you have no games to play, we provide you with games. Each week, you should download the new game that you have, play through it. They are fully functioning, working Mac games that initially either are silent or have just the original default sound effects. So your job is to create all of the music and sound effects for each of these games. So by the end of the month, you will have 3 fully working Mac games with a complete custom soundtrack, both music and sound effects, that you created for your demo reel for your portfolio, so that you have games to show off and also video captures of your music working in a game. We certainly want you to experience of how the music actually interacts with the game. So once you build all of the tracks, then you will place them into the game, play the game, and see how they play back. So allows you to test them, play the games, interact with the music, and see how the gameplay actually affects the playback of the music. All right, so let's get into the assignments for the month. We'll start to get into our week 1 assignments as we kind of give an overview of what is in store. So as we get into our assignments, the first thing here is don't fail. That's easily said, and that could be, I don't know about easily done, but assuredly done if you follow a couple of guidelines that will help you out. So the people that have the most success in this class are the folks that download the assignments as early as possible, read through them, play the video game, get a sense of what's going on in the game, and starts earlier in the week on the project so that they can run into any sort of issues. Then you can reach out to me and we can work around any sort of technical issues that come throughout the month. I certainly don't want a technical issue to get in the way of you being successful in the month. The games are software. There is software that you will be working on your computer, and a wide variety of students' computers are in all shapes and forms, and there might be some issues with the game or the technology or the software not necessarily working properly on your computer. I have like a 90, maybe 95% rate of everything successfully working on computers, but every once in a while, from month to month, I might have one or two students that are experiencing issues, and we can work through any sort of technical issue that comes into play. So download the assignments, get a sense of them, ask questions in class, or reach out, message, and email me if you have any concerns. And run into any technical issues as early on as you can so that we can work through anything after that. So that's number one. Get started as early in the week and reach out as soon as you can. Number two would be revisions. Each week you have the opportunity to work on revision assignments. So after week one assignments here, all of your assignments are due on Sunday, and then I will start grading them at the beginning of the next week. I'll go through in the first half of the week, get everything graded, and then by Wednesday, Thursday, send back all of the assignments back to you so that you have through the weekend to revise and finish out any of the assignments. You'll get grade sheets. You'll have the opportunity, if you submit your assignment, we can go through it in a live peer review session that we'll do on our Monday classes. So I can talk my way through your assignment and discuss it. If you happen to be in the live class, we can discuss back and forth. If you can only catch it on the archives, then I'll still talk my way through your session. You can get some feedback that way. You'll also get a grade sheet with comments about things to improve. And then once that comes back to you, you can revise and change anything for all of your assignments throughout each week and improve them, and not only improve the grade, but improve the overall composition and project. So the first rounds of grades, especially in the first few weeks, may not be at the level that folks ultimately want their grades to be, and so we have revisions. I don't expect that you are going to knock it out of the park the first time every single time. Most of the work that I do in a composition for a video game is through many, many revisions. I don't hit it out of the park every single time the first time. Often I don't. A lot of times revisions are there just to allow the client to point at it and say yes or no. Hey, I like this part, do more of this, or no, I don't like that, do less of that. And just give the client the opportunity to feel like they're doing something, involved in getting their money's worth. So the revision process is very necessary because a client could tell you all day long that they want one thing, and then you go and you think you nailed it, and you got this amazing piece of music, and you bring it to them, and they're like, no, that's not what I talked about at all. And you have to go back and revise and narrow down exactly everybody's intentions for the music. So take the opportunity to do revisions. Yes, it improves your grade, but ultimately it improves the quality of your projects for your portfolio. Your assignments, this is how they are generally broken down through each week. All of those add up to 25% for the week, times 4 for your full 100%. Game compositions. Each week you will have a new game that requires a particular musical soundtrack, and it's the biggest project each week. Your rest of your assignments are kind of based off of the game composition. So often it's the first one to tackle and requires the most time and effort. So like I mentioned, the general approach is you are a music composer that is hired on. I'm the game developer. I hire you to work on my series of games. I'll provide you with documentation, a copy of the game, the overall intention and asset list of what is required for the game, and then it's your job to realize and create the music soundtrack. The technical assignment each week is based off of the game composition and has you doing something technical with the music that you created. So This week you are doing a game capture. You are doing a video capture, screen capture of your music working in the game, and we'll talk a bit more about what that means. And the production technique, it is some sort of technique that is involved in the production of music for games. Like this week, it is about looping game music. Looping music is extremely important in the creation of music for a video game. So a music loop allows you to musically stay in one place while the player is doing something in the game, while they're solving a puzzle or finding the secret or figuring out what the next thing to do is. And they'll be in a loop as it goes around and around and around until they figure out what to do next, and then they move on in the game. What else? Each week you have a 20-question quiz. Those are generally based off of the Wednesday afternoon slides or the Wednesday archive. You can use the slide PDFs and the archive together to find all of the answers for the weekly quizzes. Or if you have any questions, either let me know during the class and we can discuss it, or send me a message with your question and we can discuss any sort of questions or issues. What else? So that's generally how things break down. This first week there is a general discussion question of what is your interest in games, or what is your history with games? Do you play video games? What's your favorite game? What's your favorite musical experience with a video game? Just to give me a sense of where everybody is at in the production or in their understanding of games. So I generally know where to tailor the class towards. All right. So let's get into the games themselves. I'll start out with a discussion of our first game this week called 2D Platformer. If you haven't already, go ahead and download your first game for the month and get a sense of what it's all about. So as I'm talking my way through it, you can follow along with some of the materials that are provided. Hold on, let me take a quick pause before we get into this. Let me just take a minute or so. Okay. Let's get into the games for this month. We'll start out with our first game for this week. It is called 2D Platformer. Let me bring up the video here. We can actually take a look at this. So, our game this week, called 2D Platformer, is built by Unity Games. Unity Games is the maker of the Unity game engine. The Unity game engine is a very popular tool to make games. We will talk about game engines through this month and towards the end of the month as we get more into the technology. A game engine is the main tool. It's kind of, in a very, very, very loose way, some way to think about this is that it's sort of like your DAW to make a game. That's a very bad comparison, but that falls apart in a lot of ways. But it's kind of like saying Logic or Pro Tools, where Logic or Pro Tools is the main tool that you use to make your music album. Unity games or the Unreal game engine. There's the Source game engine. There's Frostbite game engine. There's a lot of popular game engines out there, and they are the tools that are used to make a game. One interesting aspect about all of the software that we will discuss throughout the month is it is all free for you to download and to check out. And Unity Games, in order to show off their technology, they made a game the game that has been released out to the public so that you can kind of tear it apart and put your own stuff in there and kind of learn how to use their tools to make a video game. So it is a freely available game in their asset store, and we just use that and we purposed it to have a music soundtrack, and it gives us a really good first game to start out with in its need for music and sound. So 2D platformer here is kind of a ridiculous game. 2D platform, the name comes from the fact that it is a platform game, meaning that you jump from platform to platform and run around to move, and it is a 2D game, meaning that you only go left and right. You don't really go in 3D into the game image in any sort of way. So, 2D platformer is the story here of you are the Bean, the hero, a Bean with a monocle and a mustache and a bowler hat there with a bazooka. And the alien invasion has happened in London. And you can see all sorts of references there. The alien ship has come down this is London Bridge. It has fallen down because the aliens have attacked. There's the London Eye over here is broken. Big Ben is all broken up. So the aliens have attacked, and you are humanity's only hope to save the world. You are a Bean with a bazooka, and you are going to take on this enemy invasion. So, an absolutely ridiculous, wacky kind of concept for a game, but certainly fun and a good place for us to start in both our music and our sound effects. So, you will be creating all of the music for this game, and you will need to deliver all of your music in a very specific format so that it works to function and play back in the game. All of our games this month are kind of slices or slivers of a much larger game project. There really isn't an ending to this game. The score just keeps going up, and it just keeps going on, and eventually you might lose all of your health or fall into the funky river. The River Thames looks like it's been it's now toxic or something like that, and if you fall into the toxic sludge below, you lose a life. And the game just kind of starts over again and keeps going. So this is very much indicative of the types of projects that you would get in the process of game development. When working on a game, you're basically working on a broken game for months at a time while the game is is in development. So it's constantly being built and improved upon. And so all of our games this month are kind of slices of a much larger game or a much larger type of gameplay. So let's start talking about the music that is needed for this game and the soundtrack. So let me pause this here. When you download this assignment, you get, let's see here. You get a copy of the game itself. It should come out something like this. You'll get a couple of PDFs, which we'll take a look at. You'll get a copy of the game itself. You double click on the game, and this window pops up. More than likely, the regular settings should work just fine. If you know the resolution of your screen and you want to make it bigger, smaller, you can change that. If you turn windowed on, it will be in a game window like this. If you turn this off, it'll play in full screen. You can probably crank the graphics quality up to fantastic. It probably doesn't even really do all that much. The graphics are not all that amazing in this game, and most of these should work just fine. And then you hit play, and it'll pop up just like the video here in the background. I included the video. Sometimes you don't always want to reference and go play the game to check something out. You just watch the video. The only thing you shouldn't do is do not use the video to compose to directly. You can import it into your Logic session just so you can watch it every once in a while, but don't actually compose the music to the timing of the video, because everybody's going to play the game differently, and it's not going, the timing of when the shots and the music changes, all of that stuff will be different for everybody who plays. So let's take a look at the documentation that you get for the game. You get a music design document which outlines what the game's all about and the intentions of the music soundtrack. So, game is called 2D Platformer, made by Unity Games. It's a simple arcade or mobile game, and it has a target audience of casual gamers. You can kind of consider that this would be an all-ages, family-friendly, maybe on a iOS or Android device kind of game. Needs to be simple, lighthearted, wacky, and fun. It shouldn't be too dark or depressing or mean or angry or anything like that. It should be lighthearted overall, and also has that kind of wacky, silly kind of vibe to it. So information, a couple of paragraphs about the game itself. A lot of this is what I'm detailing or summarizes what we discussed now. Game overview. 2D platformer, has a long pedigree in the game industry, or platformer games in general. Classics like Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, and Metroid were 2D platformer type games. Modern varieties, Limbo, Braid, Jetpack Joyride, are common popular platformer games. So really simple, really kind of all ages, and you want to have a pretty wide audience. So the musical styling of this game, we kind of leave it open and up to you in this first project, the genre and the style and approach for it. If you want to use rock or pop or electronic or hip hop or orchestral or anything like that, we really leave it up to you in its approach. But again, be advised of it needs to be light and friendly and all ages kind of approach to it. You also might speak to the silly craziness of it. It also has maybe a little bit of a British influence in it because it takes place in London. You also have the alien invasion part to it. So I have here Monty Python meets Mars Attack, or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers. A little wacky, a little silly, but also maybe a little bit of alien invasion sci-fi kind of feel to it. But what that is and how the music ultimately comes out, we leave it a little bit more up to you on this one. There are other types of compositions. Next week's game gets a little bit more dark and gritty and futuristic and more adult and more electronic in its production style. So consider that. And your game in week 3 is entirely orchestral. So you probably don't want to eliminate any of those options, or you don't want to do everything in a orchestral style for this game and not leave any option for a later game. Instrumentation, a couple of paragraphs on that, and then asset list. This is really what I'm getting to, and one of the more important aspects of this document. The asset list details exactly the audio files that you will be creating and their file name and their format of sample rate and bit depth and audio number of audio channels. It's very, very important that you follow this formatting standard because that's the files that the game is expecting. And really, it's not all that weird or different. It's just 16-bit 44.1 stereo files, very, very common. But the file names need to be exact. The game is programmed to look for these very specific files. It doesn't know that you meant to spell it a different way. It's not smart enough to interpret that you meant to put a underscore instead of a space, or you added a character, or you capitalize something incorrectly. The game is just not going to work. It only knows, for as amazing and smart as computers seem, they're really kind of dumb in certain ways. They only know enough to do exactly what you tell it, but it just does it really, really fast. It's very important that the files are formatted correctly. So for this project, you will create a total of 9 files, 9 WAV files. Actually, here in the chat, Daniel, I opened the game and couldn't get out of it. To get out of it, you hit Command Q. I don't know if that's... Is there an exit? No. You hit Command Q to actually exit out of all of our games this month. That'll just close it right down for you. Yeah, they're not full or finished being developed, so they don't even have a menu for you to interact with and exit the game. So those elements typically happen later on in development overall. So, yep, that'll get you going. So, 9 audio files. The final thing that you will create and deliver for this project is a series of 9 audio files and a screenshot of your session. It doesn't matter what DAW you use to create the music for the game, and you don't send me the Logic session or anything like that. You just send me the final completed bounced files and a screenshot so I can see what's going on, see whatever. I always like to see everybody's approach to how the music is created. So, 9 files, 3 intro files, 3 main loop files, and 3 ending files. Notice with the file names, music, intro 1, 2, and 3, main loop 1, 2, and 3, and ending 1, 2, and 3. The intros and the ending files are each 2 bars long, and the main loop files are 8 bars long. So let's talk about how the game and the music works. We're going to take some time here after a little bit. We'll actually play some examples in Logic, but let me talk my way through it first before we actually listen to anything. Let's go back here. There we go. All right. Let's talk about how the music actually progresses through the game. When the game starts, we have 3 intro files. So as soon as Mr. Bean here drops down to the first platform, the game knows that there should be 3 intro files there, and it randomly chooses 1, 2, or 3, whichever one it wants, and starts playing it. Right at the beginning of the game, the intro cue starts playing, and they are each 2 bars long. Let me go back here, right? So intro 1, 2, or 3, 2 bars long. It randomly chooses one of these. So let's say it goes to intro 2 and plays those 2 bars. The game doesn't know anything about your music except for when those 2 bars are done. Once those 2 bars are done, then the game says, okay, well, the music's done. What's next? And the game comes back and says, okay, well, we have 3 main loops. Let's play one of those main loops. We're going to play through the 8 bars and then randomly choose another one. So intro, let's say it chose intro 2. Intro 2 doesn't always connect with main loop 2. It randomly chooses it. So intro 2 might go to main loop 3. It plays for 8 bars. The game plays for, as the game plays, the music plays. Once it reaches those end of 8 bars, then it goes and randomly chooses another one. Maybe it goes to main loop 1. It plays main loop 1 for 8 bars. And once main loop 1 is done, then it randomly chooses another one. It could re-choose the same one over again, or it could jump to any of the other ones. So we have 3 8-bar cues that randomly switch and rearrange in any sort of order. It can play 2-3-1 or 3-2-1 or 1-3-2 or whatever the different combinations are, over and over and over again, so that creates most of your music soundtrack. While the game is being played, you are hearing one of 3 different main loop cues. Once it reaches the 8 bars, it then just goes and chooses another one. Assuming that you write your music all in the same tempo and the same time signature between your intros, your main loops, and endings, and in the same key, then it will musically make sense as it switches and transitions from one to the next. Once it reaches the end of an intro, it immediately plays the next cue, main loop. Once it reaches the end of the main loop, it immediately plays the next one without a pause or a hiccup, and it makes it feel like a long, continuous piece of music that responds to the gameplay. And then at some point, eventually, I don't know if you noticed, there's a health bar at the top of Mr. Bean here that shows you how much health you have left. There are all sorts of power-ups that drop from the sky. You have bombs that you can pick up and lay down bombs or explode bombs. There's also a health pickup somewhere. Oh, there it is. A health pickup. You can jump and get some health back. But either you run out of all of your health or you fall into the toxic sludge below. But notice the bean here doesn't have any health. He gets hit by this last enemy and he falls down. As soon as that happens, as soon as you lose all of your health, you either fall in the sludge or you just get hit by that last enemy, then it immediately cuts off the main loop wherever it was and switches over to one of these endings. So for 2 or 3 minutes, these 8-bar loops have been going and switching and changing between them, and then you lose all of your health. You are not guaranteed that that is going to be happening on a bar or a beat or anything that is in sync. So the ending cues just immediately cut off the previous one and transition into the new endings. And that works because you just lost. You lost control of the game, you lost control of the character, and the music switches and it plays an ending. The ending cues need to be resolutions or they need to resolve the music from the main loop. So they need to be endings. They need to end in silence. So they need to start at the same volume as the main loops, and then the drums kind of do a final roll to a crash to end. The bass line resolves back to the tonic to end. The chord progression, the melody all resolves to that final chord, that final note. Everything hits, gives it enough time to decay out to silence, and it ends. Then it starts the whole process back over at the top. So by the fact that the music is split out into individual files, we can rearrange the order of them in any sort of connection. Intro 3 can go into main loop 1 that can go into ending 2. So you have to make sure that all of them are in the same key, they're all in the same tempo, and they all feel like all part of the same song. They shouldn't feel like 3 separate songs or 9 different songs or files or anything like that. They all need to revolve around a core idea, similar instrumentation, and similar tempo and key so that they all feel like one cohesive full song. Each cue needs to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. That melody needs to develop over the course of the cue. Each cue should have a different variation of that melody. So let's go ahead and take a listen to some examples here to get a bit of better idea. Enough chatting my way through it. Let's actually listen to something. So these are 4 different student submissions, right? And a total of 9 files here. These are all of the main loops, right? 3 8-bar cues. These are all of the intros. Let's zoom in here. Intro 1, 2, and 3. 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 And these I'll probably bring this back over here. Come And these are all the endings. Ending 1, 2, and 3. Notice that all of the endings end. They all resolve to silence, or they should. Like this is bad. It shouldn't get cut off like this. And we'll talk about that. But endings resolve and finish the piece of music that was playing in the main loop. So the only reason that they're kind of sorted like this is alphabetical. They're alphabetical when they. This is the alphabetical order when they import into Logic. The fact that endings are over here and intros are here and main loops are over here. So we'll listen to probably 2 of these examples just to get a sense of what is going on in the game. Let's see. Let's start out here. Make sure we can all hear something. Let's see. Let me go to my audio setup here. Make sure this works for everybody. All right, let me know. Can you hear this? That seems to be working. And can you still hear me and everything's at a good level and all that? Yes, I got a whole bunch of yeses. Excellent. Okay. So, 3 main loops. Notice that the main loops are, well, number 1, there's 3 of them in each one of these. They are meant as loops. So from the beginning to the end, solid music all the way through. When they reach the ending, they have the ability to return back to the front. The beginnings of each one of these cues, you would probably be best served to resolve back to the tonic. Just for the fact that it allows you to easily jump to any one of these 3 cues and still make sense. So if you, if you reach the end of one of these loops and you kind of hang on the 4 or the 5 or some suspended chord that allows you to nicely and firmly resolve back to the front. If these are all at the tonic, then whenever you reach the end of one of these, it can jump off to the next one and always make sense wherever it goes. So these are 8-bar loops. They're all in the same key. They're all the same tempo, but they should have slight variations to their progression, slight variations to their melody. You can add and change instrumentation. You shouldn't do it too much. Like there's sometimes what I'll hear is almost sounds like they're scrolling through presets in Ultra Beat or something like that, where it's a completely different drum kit in each one, a completely different bass line in each one, and it sounds like a different band from one cue to the next. Instead of that, you can have slight changes to the melody, maybe change a different lead instrument. That's fine. But development and change in the melody, slight changes to the progression, bass line, the drum pattern, maybe the hi-hats change or the kick snare pattern changes up a little bit, or you go to the ride or something. But the main loops should have the ability of jumping from one to the next. So here's one example. When it reaches the end, it can jump back to the front. Makes sense. There needs to be development through the 8 bars. There needs to be change. Need to have a strong melody. Then when it reaches the end there, it could jump off to the next file, no problem. There's a change in the progression. The instrumentation stays the same, but it all feels like one band, but it can easily jump from one cue to the next. And it always makes sense when it reaches the next piece of music. It can just jump from one to the next, always making sense. So those have to be able to rearrange in any sort of order with the development through each one of the cues. The three intros are intros. They need to build, they need to rise, create a sense of energy and anticipation heading into the main cues. So here are three intros. So they build, they have a sense of pace and energy to them. They should use the same instrumentation, have a bit of drums, bass, harmony, and melody in them so that they smoothly transition into one of the main loops. And any sort of combination, let's say intro 2, jump back. Intro 2 might go to main loop 3. What am I doing here? There we go. So here's intro 2. Here's main loop 3, and they have to make sense. Or if we take main loop 1 and apply it to main loop 2. No, intro 1 and apply it to main loop 2. Consistent, maintaining similar instrumentation and pacing. You probably don't have a lot of room to jump off to different key changes, tempo changes, just to leave enough to develop through the full 8 bars. The ending cues need to resolve and finish. So they need to end. They need to reach silence. These actually get cut off a little bit. You got to watch out for that. If I zoom way in. So you got to watch out for that. Make sure it fades all the way to silence. But musically, it needs to resolve probably back to the tonic, back to that last chord, note, beat. Everything hits, ends, then the instrumentation decays out to silence. Let's try another one here. Let's jump over here. Give you just a different approach. This one is a bit more of an electronic feel to it. 3 main loops. Strong melody in each one that develops through the cues. Three intros. Again, need to use the same instrumentation and create a sense of anticipation or rise heading towards the main loop cues. 3 endings. So everything uses a bar, maybe a bar and a half to finish out. Little drum fill, bass line returns, everything returns back to that last note or beat. hits, then has enough time to decay to silence. Any questions so far? Any of the things that I've chatted about? You can go ahead and post those up. Let me go find one more thing. Let's try this one. Let me bring this up. A couple of other suggestions here. I think Logic's about to pop up in my face. Let's see. That's what I'm looking for. Yep. All right. Go away. Okay. Suggestions here. Number 1, compose interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. A lot of times what I get with these 8-bar loops is it's really a 4-bar loop that's stated twice. You just do the same thing in the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. You need to make sure to use the entire 8 bars to develop your chord progression and your melody. The 8 bars are going to be repetitive enough on their own for the fact that they loop and they switch. So make sure to not make it even more repetitive by doing 4-bar loops twice. Or even worse, I hear a 2-bar loop 4 times, or a 1-bar loop 8 times. Those are bad things. So you want to avoid as much repetition as possible that's already default into the system for the fact that you've got 3 8-bar loops that are rotating around. Then it needs to transition. Make sure all transitions or all loops transition fluidly. As it goes from 8-bar loop to 8-bar loop, you need to make sure that musically, harmonically, melodically, rhythmically, everything makes sense. Keeping in the same key at the same tempo and the time signature is going to create a lot of that, or help a lot of that. Keep the same tempo. That will do it. Already certainly hit on that. Continuous loops. You need continuous and seamless loops. Avoid gaps, fades, pops, clicks, anything. You do not want to signal to the player that they're stuck in a loop. You don't want to have them hear the same pop or the same fade or something in there that reminds them that they're in a loop. Overall mix, consistent levels across all of the files. That's the main thing. Ultimately, you will have, or you are ultimately responsible for the mix. You will be creating music and sound effects, so you have to balance all of those things together. So starting out with a strong mix that fills up the meter, pay attention to your peak mix and your RMS or average level to make sure that you have a solid level coming out for the game. Sometimes people will bounce files, they have it cranked up in their studio, and then when they bounce the files, the waveforms are like this big, or really, really tiny. And then they just get drowned out by all the sound effects in the game. So you got to watch out for that. Once you do bounce all of your files, you can actually put them into the video game to test them out. So let me show you. This is a really easy process. And you should definitely do this before you submit your assignment. Actually, you will have to do this because you're going to do a video capture. But this allows you to test how things work in the game to make sure that everything sounds as best as possible. So let me... Week 1, game composition. Let me bring up this right here. Okay. Where'd that go? This. Okay, this is the game itself. Right? When you double click on this, you get this window and you open up the game and you play the game. Once you have completed your music, you can actually place your files in a music folder and play them back the next time you run the game. And all you have to do is just find the correct location. So if I right-click on 2D Platformer, I can choose Show Package Contents, and that will give me a folder for appropriately named contents. And I can go into this Contents folder. I go to Contents, I go to Data, and I go to Streaming Assets. And you'll find a music folder. Go in there, and you'll dump your 9 audio files into this folder, assuming that they are correctly named, sample rate, bit depth, number of channels, everything is formatted correctly. The next time you run and play this game, you will hear your music playing back. So I certainly don't expect you to remember that file location, so it's listed here: contents, data, streaming assets, music, right? It shows you the folder structure, where to place the files. Test them out, make sure they work. You'll provide a screenshot for the assignment, and you will deliver the 9 files, right? Here's how everything should look. 9 audio files named and formatted very specifically to the assignment with a screenshot of your session. Again, whatever DAW you use is up to you. I play the role of the client. Your client's probably not even going to know what the heck you mean when you say Pro Tools or Logic. I don't know. Maybe they've heard of something before, but they don't care what brand of hammer you use to build their house. Just build their house. I don't care what brand of DAW you use to make your music. Just make your music. So you will provide a screenshot to show me what you've been up to in the production of your music. Okay. So hopefully that gives you some good insight into 2D Platformer and what the game is all about and the overall musical approach. If you have any questions, you can let me know. Or if you have any issues throughout the week, just send me a message. We can discuss. Your game for week 2. Next week, you will be working on Angry Bots. Angry Bots is a futuristic third-person shooter. And it's basically a different approach to the music, a different style of game. Every game out there has a unique use and approach for the music. There are certain generic ideas and structures that we can, common approaches that we can use across multiple different games, and that's really what we're focused on. But each game, both in this class and out in the professional industry, has a unique and different approach. It's like each composition for each movie is different. So how the music is going to be played back is unique. So this game is much more of a modern or futuristic compositional approach. Probably much more electronic, lots of effects processors, drum machines, synths. It needs to be hard-edged and dark and heavy and gritty, and probably not meant for an all-ages appropriate game. And so epic metal or orchestral or electronic or very beat-driven heavy music works very well for this types of Angry Bots kind of game. Then we take all of the synths and drum machines and throw all of those away for our last game in week 3, Palace of Renthalion, based off of an open world fantasy type of game, where we focus on strictly acoustic and orchestral instrumentation. So fantasy, more traditional orchestral composition necessary for this type of game. The music is a unique approach, a different approach to how it works and functions in the game, and really the overall most challenging of the projects throughout the month in how the music is designed and fulfilled. So, different games each week, 3 games throughout the month. We do not have a brand new game in week 4. Because we don't have a week 5 to do peer review and revisions and listen to everything and work on it and update it again. So 3 games in the first 3 weeks of the class, and then we use week 4 to kind of resolve and finish everything out. Your other assignments for the week, your production technique is an assignment about different looping techniques for your music. As I mentioned earlier, music loops for games are extremely important because it allows you to musically sit in one place as long as you need to before you then move on into the next part of the game. So if the player needs to solve a puzzle or to find a secret or to just get lost and find their way, you can musically sit there and wait for the player to do something until you then transition and move on to the next part of the game. So there are different approaches and techniques for music loops in games that will make your life a whole lot easier. And you will use and reuse these techniques throughout the month. I will leave this up till Wednesday. I'll start our Wednesday session with a description and a kind of a workflow for this production technique assignment. And your third or final assignment this week is your game capture. Once you have created all of your music from the game composition, you put it into your game. No, you put your music into the game and you test it out. We showed you that file folder, and you take your 9 files, you put them in a very specific folder, and the next time you run the game, you'll magically hear all of your music playing back correctly. The game expects those 9 files to exist in a very specific folder, and if it's all there, then it will play back the music as intended. Once everything is set up and working in the game, you put it in the game and you test it out, and maybe there's something that you need to tweak a bit. You need to go update the music. Sometimes what you hear out of your DAW and what gets played back in the game may not be as exactly as you expected it. It's not going to like recompose your music or anything. It just may not play back or loop and transition as intended. So once everything is tweaked and everything is working properly in your game, then you'll do a video capture of it. And you will use QuickTime and an audio program called Loopback to do all of your video captures. I'm pretty sure that you have done some sort of used QuickTime in some way to do a video capture or a screen capture or a camera capture or something over the course of your time in this degree program. And we will use a similar approach to be able to capture the video from your game. Really, this is not a very challenging assignment overall because all of the work is done in creation of the music. But having a video representation of your game is extremely important as you show it off and demo it around to different folks. So we'll talk about and continue to create video captures of all of our games this month. So starting out in the beginning of our next session, I'll also get into a bit of the more specifics about the video game capture. But those are the assignments to look forward to this week. That should be enough from me for our first session this afternoon. Hopefully that gives you some good solid information to get started in the class and get started with the 2D platformer assignment. Make sure you download all of the assignments and take a look at the requirements and all of the documentation and material, play the video game, check it out, and start thinking of your musical approach that you want to take for this first game. That should be enough for me. Let's go ahead and wrap it up there. I'll stick around for a few minutes after the class. If you have any questions, go ahead and post those up here in the chat. When will the archive be posted? Typically the next day. I convert it after class and upload it, and then I post it up on FSO as an announcement, and you will get a notification for that. So all of the archives, if you can't make the live class, then you can always check out the archive the next day that would be Tuesday and Thursday. All right, so thank you very much. You have yourself a good rest of the day and afternoon, and I will see you again on Wednesday. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks a lot.